A bizarre federal case out of central Louisiana has pulled back the curtain on what prosecutors say was a long-running visa fraud operation hiding behind fake violent crime reports. According to a 62-count federal indictment, 3 police chiefs, a town marshal, and a local business owner were charged in a scheme that allegedly invented armed robberies that never happened, then used those fake crimes to help non-citizens obtain U visas. If the allegations are true, the operation ran for nearly a decade and turned some of the quietest small towns in Louisiana into the paper setting for an astonishing number of supposed violent robberies. The towns at the center of the case are Oakdale, Glen Mora, and Forest Hill, all in central Louisiana. These are small communities where major crime is not exactly routine. Oakdale has a population of roughly 6,600, Glen Mora around 1,000, and Forest Hill about 600. Federal investigators began noticing something that did not fit the normal pattern for towns of that size. An unusual number of people from outside Louisiana were supposedly becoming victims of armed robberies there. That anomaly appears to have been one of the first clues that something was wrong. At the heart of the alleged scheme is the U visa, formerly known as the U non-immigrant status. Congress created the U visa in 2000 through the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act. The idea was to encourage victims of certain serious crimes to report what happened and assist law enforcement without fearing immediate removal from the United States. The program can provide temporary legal status and work authorization, and after a period of time, recipients may be able to apply for lawful permanent residency. To qualify, an applicant must show that they were the victim of a qualifying crime, that they suffered substantial mental or physical abuse, and that they were, are, or are likely to be helpful to law enforcement or prosecutors. One of the key pieces of evidence in the application is a certification signed by a law enforcement official confirming that the person was a legitimate victim and was helpful in the case. Prosecutors say that requirement became the weak point that this Louisiana group exploited. The businessman accused of serving as the middleman is Chandrakant Patel, also known as Lala Patel, who owned a Subway shop and convenience stores in Oakdale. According to the indictment, immigrants seeking a path to remain in the United States would contact Patel and pay him thousands of dollars. Patel would then allegedly pay participating law enforcement officials about $5,000 per person to create fraudulent police reports claiming those individuals had been victims of armed robberies. The officers would then sign official U visa certification forms under oath, falsely verifying that the applicants were real crime victims who had cooperated with law enforcement. Those documents would then be sent to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services as part of the visa applications. Federal authorities say hundreds of people may have benefited from this arrangement. The indictment itself focuses on 24 specific cases, and one detail made the pattern especially glaring. Every listed victim reportedly had the last name Patel. That does not prove fraud by itself, but in the context of tiny Louisiana towns with little violent crime, it was a giant warning sign. Prosecutors allege that the crimes were simply made up on paper and that not one of those armed robberies ever actually occurred. One of the more striking allegations is that Patel himself was granted a U visa in 2023 based on his own claimed status as a robbery victim. In other words, the man accused of coordinating fake robbery claims allegedly secured immigration benefits through the same type of false claim he was helping others submit. Investigators also say the money moved through the scheme did not just sit in accounts. The indictment describes cash purchases, transfers among multiple bank accounts, and the acquisition of real estate and vehicles. Among the examples cited, the Oakdale police chief allegedly bought a Ford F-150 with $15,000 in cash. Federal prosecutors are seeking forfeiture of several properties, vehicles, and safe deposit boxes, arguing that they were tied to the alleged fraud proceeds. The public record suggests this case did not emerge because of one dramatic whistleblower moment, but because the numbers eventually stopped making sense. A former Oakdale police officer reportedly said he remembered only 2 or 3 actual armed robberies in his entire decade on the force. That is what makes the flow of robbery reports tied to out-of-state victims stand out so sharply. In places where violent crime is rare, a sudden cluster of armed robbery paperwork can attract attention, especially when the victims all fit a narrow pattern and the reports support immigration filings. By 2024, federal investigators had begun digging deeper, and the case escalated into a major operation. Roughly 200 law enforcement officers executed search warrants across the area, including at Patel's Subway shop. That kind of response signals how seriously federal authorities viewed the allegations, not only as immigration fraud, but also as public corruption. When police chiefs and other sworn officials are accused of filing false reports and certifying false claims under oath, it cuts directly at the integrity of the criminal justice system. The U-Visa program depends heavily on trust in local law enforcement certifications. If that trust is corrupted, legitimate victims can also be harmed because fraud fuels skepticism toward a program designed to protect people who have actually suffered serious crimes. This Louisiana case also appears not to be the only one of its kind. Federal prosecutors in Massachusetts recently charged 10 people in a separate alleged U-Visa fraud scheme involving staged convenience store robberies. In that case, according to authorities, fake holdups were performed on camera so the store clerks could later present security footage to police as evidence. That parallel matters because it suggests investigators are confronting a broader method of exploiting the U-Visa system, not just a one-off local scam. The U-Visa program has long faced a massive backlog because demand far exceeds the annual statutory cap of 10,000 principal visas. That backlog can leave applicants waiting for years. Where there is a valuable immigration benefit in long delays, fraud schemes can emerge around the process, especially if corrupt insiders are willing to manufacture the supporting documents. Still, it is important to keep the legal posture clear. An indictment is an accusation, not a conviction, and the defendants are presumed innocent unless proven guilty in court. The 5 defendants initially pleaded not guilty. At the same time, reports that plea change hearings have been scheduled for Patel and the former Glenmora police chief are notable because such hearings often mean a defendant is preparing to change course and potentially cooperate with prosecutors. If that happens, investigators could get a much clearer picture of how the alleged network operated, how many applications were affected, and whether additional people were involved. What makes this story so striking is the contrast between the setting and the scope. These were not big city departments with sprawling crime loads. They were tiny towns where not much usually happens, and yet, on paper, they became recurring scenes of armed robberies involving the same surname over and over again. Prosecutors say that fiction generated immigration benefits, cash payments, vehicle purchases, and property deals for years. If the allegations hold up, the case will stand as a reminder that fraud does not always look sophisticated. Sometimes it survives simply because people assume no one is paying attention. In this instance, federal investigators apparently did start paying attention, and once they pulled on the thread, the entire story began to unravel.